All right, you guys doing okay today? Man, I'm excited. I'm excited because I'm talking about something that I've always dealt with, that I've always had trouble with. So whenever I went to Ozark Christian College, one of the number one lessons they teach you is don't preach to a crowd, preach to one. And most of the time, I'm preaching to the person in the mirror because that's what I'm feeling, and I know there's somebody else that probably can feel the same way. So I want to tell you a quick story. There's back in high school, I know when you look at me, the first word you think of, now he's an athlete. He's an athlete. Okay, I used to be an athlete. I didn't always look like I was second cousins to the Michelin Man, but still, I was an athlete at one point. I loved sports in high school. I did every sport possible. I even was the reason why they had a baseball team my senior years, because they needed a ninth person, and I said, I don't play baseball. I don't know how to play baseball. And they said, we don't care. I said, and then that's how they got the worst record they've ever received of 120 pitches in one inning. All they heard all day long was Bach, ball, 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 Bach, and it was literally just you might as well just walk around because I'm just going to be throwing them over there. But it was fun. It was a blast. I loved playing sports, but my favorite sport of all time is not basketball, football. Love football. I've always loved it. First play I ever played in football, I blocked somebody in the back. I didn't know that was against the rules, but I felt good about it. It was my first flag. First got it out of the way. But when I went to high school, I was so excited to be the big fish in the little pond. You know, we had 60 kids in our high school. I had 16 in my graduating class. And so if you were good at sports there, you looked great, right? I go to any other school. I go to Joplin High, and I'm probably a cheerleader. Barely. Not even that. It's like probably just like kind of like a make-a-wish. Like, let's just make them feel better. Put them on there. But I probably wouldn't even make the teams. But at Altoona Midway, I was the man. So, or at least so I thought. So my freshman year, I could not wait. I was backup quarterback, but also I was wide receiver, but I was backup quarterback as well. So I never planned on playing quarterback. We had a guy, a senior, his name was Jake Widener. He was tall, he was athletic, he was strong, he was the quarterback, all right? And so I'm thinking, I'm going to be in the end zone. I'm catching passes. And so that's what I'm thinking all throughout the season, practicing and everything. I'm thinking, I'm catching passes. First game of my high school career is the day of, and it's the morning of. And my coach, Jim Leonard, comes up to me. He says, Coach Leonard says, Andy, got to talk to you for a sec. I said, okay, what's up, Coach? You know, I was, antsy freshman. I'm like, what's up? Yeah, I mean, what's going on? Obviously, I'm starting because we had like 13 people on the team. And it's an 8-man football, so didn't have much choice. But I'm excited because he's maybe getting me some good news, maybe just kind of pump me up a little bit. He says, bad news. I said, not a great start, okay? He said, I just got a call. Jake Widener has meningitis, and so you're going to have to play quarterback tonight. And I said, say that again. I don't think I heard you right. Let's start this conversation over. And I realized, wow, this is going to go one of two ways. One, horrible. Two, actually, there's no other option. It's going to be horrible. So I'm realizing this is going to be bad. So we go to Miami, Oklahoma, which is, apparently that's how it's pronounced, Miami. Sure it is. I'm sure it is. All right, but whatever. We'll call it Miami because I don't want for you guys to tune out. So I get there, and we're lining up and everything, and by the end of the night, quarterback Andy DeNoon, number 7 of Altoona Midway, his greatest stat for the night, 11 fumbles. Okay, so not great, not a great start. 11 fumbles to start my football career. I was scared. I dropped the ball. I would get sacked. And we only had one touchdown, and it was our 300-pound lineman somehow got an interception and ran 10 yards and scored a touchdown. So good for him. But it did not start well for me. I'm pretty sure I had a concussion, but we didn't have a choice, so I kept playing. And so they said, Andy, you just got to suck it up. It's literally the first minute of the game, Andy. You can't quit now. And I don't want to. So I dropped the ball 11 times, and they got the ball 11 times. We never recovered it once. So not a great start, right? By the end of my football career, I happened to be an all-state wide receiver. I was a backup quarterback, and I was a quarterback for several games, and I did decent, and I was even a running back because when you're in that type of situation, if you're less than 200 pounds, you play any position, okay? If you're over 200 pounds, I'm sorry, you're a lineman, all right? That's just how it works. But I got into my junior year, and my brother got into high school. So the competition starts, right? The little Danoon versus the big Danoon. And his first high school football game, we got in, and he was the running back. He's a quick little guy, okay? So he grabs the football, and he runs for probably 10, 15 yards. He's doing great. But then probably in the second half of the game, he drops the ball, and we lose it. He fumbles it, and we lose it, right? And so I'm looking at him, his first high school football game, and I'm thinking about myself and my first high school football game. And I go up to him, and I put my arm around him, and I say, "What are you doing? Pull it together, man. You can't drop the ball in your first game. Are you joking? What's wrong with you? If we had anybody else on the bench, we would probably try to switch you out, but we don't have anybody, so stay in the game." So I was furious as an older brother that my brother just dropped the ball. And then my coach, Jim Leonard, afterwards, after he saw me and him arguing, he says, "Andy, let me remind you of something. Remember way back in the day when you played your first high school football game, dropped it 11 times? Don't think you're not really the person to talk. I think you should show a little forgiveness, a little mercy," right? And that reminds me of what we're going to be talking about today. So open up to Matthew 18, because we're going to be talking not exactly that, but the idea of having mercy. And so I love Matthew 18, not only because number one thing when reading the Bible, you have to understand what, youth? Context. Thank you. I love you guys. I'll pay you all later. But context, we have to understand context. We have to understand what's going on before and after this. What pushes this scripture to be to either be said, or what leads to these situations. And so before Matthew 18, we have the transfiguration, right? And we have to understand that Jesus had 12 disciples, right? But he had the close three. What were the three people?
Peter, James, and John.
Attaboy, you're listening. All right, Peter, James, and John were Jesus' type three. His disciples that he spent a little more time with, that he shared a little bit more life with, and he prayed with a little bit more, and he shared a little bit more wisdom with them by taking them along on this transfiguration. And as you can understand, the disciples are people just like us, right? People just like us that are struggling, that have selfish ambitions, that have desires, that are ungodly. And so we have to understand that these three being brought out of the group probably makes the other disciples feel like, well, why did they get to go see, talk to God and go see Elijah and hang out with Jesus on the mountain? Like, that's not fair. What about us? And then Peter's always piping in and everything like that. And so there's probably some trouble going on, and we only think that. I only say that is because of the context. Because we can constantly see that there's a struggle going on before and after Matthew 18. After they come down for the transfiguration, the disciples that were down at the bottom down, they come up to Jesus and say, "Listen, we have a guy who's demon-possessed, and we couldn't cast out the demon. So if you could help us, that'd be great." And so Jesus looks at them, and he says one of my favorite phrases that Jesus says, and it's harsh, and it kicks you right in the face. And he says, "You unbelieving and perverse generation, how much longer must I put up with you? How much longer must I be here? Bring the son here to me." They bring the demon-possessed son, and he casts out the demon, sends him away, and the disciples ask the obvious question, "That was cool, Jesus, but why couldn't we do that? So why couldn't we cast out the demon?" Jesus being, much like Nate, very compassionate, and very, very slow to, to using his words that may offend. You're never offensive in any way. You never speak the harsh truth when it needs to be told. Well, Jesus looks at him and says, "Because you have little faith." Maybe that's why. He says, you said you have little faith. He says, "For I tell you, if you have the faith the size of a mustard seed, you can look at a mountain, tell it to move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." The disciples, "Okay, got it. Right, little faith. Got it. I'll work on that. Thank you, Jesus. Oh, thank you, Jesus." How does that make you feel? 3 disciples get to go up to see the transfiguration. The other people get pretty much scolded because they can't cast out a demon correctly. Then Peter, James, and John are probably arguing and probably acting pretty cocky. Maybe they're the kind of acting like we're the best. Obviously, we're the close three, because what happens next is they come up in Matthew 18. They ask Jesus something. The disciples as a whole come up and ask Jesus, who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? That's the question they're asking. But I don't think they're looking for Jesus, God, right? What are they looking for? Me. Who's the greatest? And then Jesus knows that's a loaded question. He says, you see that child? Sits a child on his knee, and he says, this is who the greatest in the kingdom of heaven is. Unless you become like this child, you will never become the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And so this is frustrating, right? These people get more time with Jesus, you don't. You can't cast out a demon, he can. We're not all the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And then Peter comes up and frustrated. You can tell. This is why I love Matthew 18. There's stuff for everybody. Everything that people are dealing with, it's right here. Lack of forgiveness, discipline, bitterness and friendship, anger toward loved ones. We've all dealt with those things. And this all leads up to Peter asking one very interesting question, which makes you think, what's going on behind the scenes of being a disciple? Peter approached him and asked, Lord, this is right after him, Jesus telling people how to deal with issues in the church, discipline. If you have an issue with somebody in the church, you go and you talk with that person, because that's how things get fixed, believe it or not, right? How many of you guys know somebody, you have an issue with this person? Well, how about this? Go post in a passive-aggressive post on Facebook, then talk to everyone except for that one person, and that should fix it. Wrong. Bible says, Matthew 18 says, go talk to that person. Conversate. Don't work? Grab one of your pastors, grab one of your elders, have them discussion. If it doesn't work, then guess what? You can read the rest of the chapter. And then right after that, it says, then Peter approached. So right after getting preached about disciplining, in church discipline and being with your brother and forgiving them and talking it out, Peter then approaches Jesus with a very interesting question. And you can follow along with me in Matthew 18, verse 21. Peter approached him and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Listen to that again. Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? As many as 7 times? Right? Just throwing it out 7 times maybe? Maybe a holy number, so maybe just 7? That's a loaded question, right? Nobody just asks those types of questions, out of nowhere. Your kids come up, how longer do I have to play with him? How longer do I have to keep dragging him around? It's a loaded question. There's something going on. And Peter asked, how many times, Jesus? Because I've had it. So give me a number, Jesus. Give me a number. Give me a number. 7 times? Is that good? And then Jesus answers in a very Jesus way. He says, I tell you, not as many as 7, but 70 times 7. Now Peter's probably like, okay, just 70 times 7, carry the 2. I'm going to have to find, okay, could you just tell me the number? Because that would be a lot quicker. And then he goes on to be even more Jesus-like in the way he explains things, and he tells a parable, which is by far one of my favorite parables of all time. And I want to read through it one time, and then we're going to go back through it. So follow with me, starting in verse 23 in chapter 18. For this reason, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle accounts, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought before him. Since he did not have any money to pay it back, his master commanded that he, his wife, his children, everything he had to be sold to pay the debt. At this, the servant fell face down before him, saying, be patient with me, and I will pay you everything. Then the master of that servant had compassion, released him, and forgave him the loan. That servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. He grabbed him, started choking him, and saying, pay what you owe. At this, his fellow servant fell down and began begging him, be patient with me, I will pay you back. But he wasn't willing. Instead, he went and threw him into prison so he could pay what was owed. When the other servants saw that what had taken place, they were deeply distressed and went and reported the master everything that had happened. Then after he had summoned him, the master said to him, "You wicked servant, I forgave you all the debt because you begged me. Shouldn't you have also had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you?" And because he was angry, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he could pay everything that was owed. So also my heavenly Father will do this unless every one of you forgives his brother or sister from your heart. Wow. I love that. I love it because there's so much going on here. Verse 24. For the reason the kingdom of heaven can be compared to the king who wanted to settle accounts in the servants. Verse 24 says, when he began to settle accounts, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought before him. How much is 10,000 talents? Historically, like with everything compared, how much do you think that is? A couple million? A few million is what they say. Is what the research say, historians. Has anyone ever owed, maybe don't raise your hand, a couple $1,000,000? Guys, that's crazy. When I read this the first time, I was like, it's probably a couple $100 or $1,000 or something. A few million. This guy owed a few $1,000,000. And he was in front of the king. Imagine this. If every sin you've ever committed, every sinful thought that's ever exited your brain, every sinful word that's ever left your lips, every single sin was put in the form of money that you owed. Would you ever be able to pay it back? You get close and then it'd keep stacking up, right? Because it just doesn't stop. It'd go on and on and on and on. And that's a staggering amount. More than a few million for sure. Verse 25. Verse 25 says, he did not have the money to pay it back. His master commanded that he and his wife, his children, and everything he had sold to be paid off for the debt. Now, when you owe something and you can't pay it, what happens? You have a parking ticket. You have plenty of parking tickets and you don't pay them. What happens? Car's taken your way, driver's license revoked. I don't know, I've never done it. But I imagine you get in trouble, right? You don't pay the government your taxes. Tax season right around the corner, right? You don't pay your taxes. What happens? You don't pay what you're owed, you get in trouble. Ask Wesley Snipes, right? No one get that? Okay, Nate got it, all right? But when you owe something and you don't pay it back, you get in trouble. And is that right? That's right. If you owe something, pay it back. And if you don't, you get in trouble. And so this guy owed a few $1,000,000 and he could not pay it. There's probably punishment headed that way, right? And is that justified? Yes. And just like us, we are dirty, we are sinful. We have disgustingly perverted the idea and the creation of what God originally created us for. We have sinned against him, and there is a payment due, right, to wash away that sin. And because we cannot pay that, we deserve punishment. That's what Romans tells us. He says we deserve death. Interesting. But why his children and his wife, right? I mean, what did they do? It was him that owed. And it makes me wonder, when I read this over and over and over again, I realized that not only when you owe something, it doesn't only just affect you, right? When you sin, it doesn't just affect you, right? It drags other people down. It hurts your family, it hurts your loved ones, it hurts the people you care about, and it also can lead them down the same destructive path. And so by him owing and not be able to pay it back, he also hurt his family and everything he had ever worked for. Verse 26. At this, the servants fell face down before him and saying, "Be patient with me, and I will pay you everything." Man, if that doesn't speak to your heart and say, listen, we have to fall on our face and ask for forgiveness. There's no way, like we just discussed, there's no way we could ever pay it back, right? The way our sin adds up, there's no way we could pay it back. So our only go-to option, we can't run away, Jonah proved that. Our only option is to fall down on our face and beg for forgiveness, beg for the loan to be completely just getting rid of, for the debt to be paid off. So we beg and we ask, and we should never run away from that. When it should never, no matter how many years you've been a Christian, it should never get to the point where you're okay just not begging for forgiveness. You should never just be content with, yeah, God's going to forgive me. Because the Bible says, do not sin so that grace may increase. We don't sin because, oh, God's going to forgive me anyway, so it don't matter. We beg and we ask him, God, give me forgiveness, please. And so, what does the king do? Then the master of the servant had compassion, released him, and forgave him. He had pity on him. He had mercy, he had grace, and he had forgiveness upon the servant. And says, listen, I'm going to let you free. Oh, so I can leave and work until I pay it off? No. You don't understand. You're free. You're done. You don't have to work anymore. You're paid off. How many of us Christians just argue with that all the time, right? Or other religions, they'll say, no, but I know you said it's free, but I'm going to keep working, right? Because I'm sure there's a certain amount of services I have to go to. I'm sure there's a certain amount of work hours that I have to do at the church to gain that forgiveness, to feel better about myself, to get to the level so I can become a Christian. There's many religions like that where we have to work to gain that forgiveness. And God is saying, the king is saying, you're free. You don't have to work anymore. It's a gift. Just accept it. So the servant accepts it. And in verse 28, that servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owned him 100 denarii. How much is that, Dan? You know? 100 denarii? 100 denarii? Few bucks. That's what they say. Few bucks. Okay? And it said, who owed him 100 denarii, a couple bucks. He grabbed him, probably hugging him, right? Hugging him, saying, man, my master had mercy on me. I'm going to have mercy on you. I love you, buddy. No. What does he start doing? He starts choking him. Grabs him by the throat and says, pay what you owe. And man, this reminds me of a lot of people today, even me. How many times do we get forgiveness? We see that huge stack of what we owed. It's wiped clean. We're free from it. And then we go out and see somebody and we say, you deserve to pay for what you've done. I know I got off scot-free. I'm forgiven. But you hurt me. And you don't deserve forgiveness. Right? I see that all the time on online when people are arguing and stuff like that with having something that they could just keep scrolling by, right? Just scroll away. Don't look away. I heard a comedian one time, he said people on the internet are like when somebody who goes to a coffee shop, this is how ridiculous it is. They go to a coffee shop and it says, free guitar lessons. I don't want guitar lessons. And starts yelling and screaming, I don't like this. And then calls the person, are you the one giving the guitar lessons? Well, yeah. Well, I don't want them. Like, okay, relax. It's not your problem. But yet we nitpick and we say, that person hurt me. They don't deserve forgiveness. I can't forgive them for what they've done. Yeah, I know God's forgiven me, but they deserve to pay. They've never even said they're sorry. Why should I forgive them? He's choking his servant. His servant is begging, please be patient. I will pay you what I owe. But he wasn't willing to do that. He threw him into prison until he could pay what was owed. And other servants saw this and they were upset, and so they ran to the king and they said, King, you're not going to believe this. The servant that you just forgave for a few $1 million, he's out choking one of his servants for a couple bucks. The king is angry, brings him in here and says the worst greeting that I could imagine hearing from our king. He says, you wicked servant. Well, that's not my king. That's not my God. He would never talk to me like that. Yeah, he would. If you were acting like this, yeah, he would. He said, you wicked servant. Should you not have mercy on your servant because I showed you mercy? Should you not have forgotten, gave his debt because I forgave yours? And so he gets upset and he throws him in jail until he can pay what's owed. And he says, that's exactly what your king is going to do if we cannot forgive brothers and sisters in our true heart. I don't know about you, that messes me up. When I was 14 years old, someone hurt me beyond what I could ever imagine. Something that messes with me every single day. Something I've only shared with the youth at one time. Because it's hard to talk about. And every single day I ask myself, have I truly forgiven him? Have I truly forgave this person? And I'm not so sure sometimes. So I don't know if I deserve forgiveness. I didn't know if I deserved it. Because it's tough. Because I know I'm not the only one who's been hurt by somebody. Or something. Or maybe has done something that has screwed them up. That has messed them up beyond repair, it feels like. And maybe one of you are the people who have messed you up and are angry because they don't want to give forgiveness. Maybe you're somebody who wants forgiveness. But maybe you're somebody who doesn't want to give forgiveness like this servant. Just like Peter, he was fed up, man. He was fed up. He went to Jesus after the whole talk about discipline, and he said, Jesus, got a question for you. How many times, weird question, I know. How many times, just roundabout number, how many times must I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? And I know I say that in kind of a joking tone, but I can't imagine he was in a very joking mood at this point. I bet he was upset. Because he says, how many times, Jesus, because I've had it, I'm sick of it. How many times, Jesus, do I have to forgive my brother? Because I've had it up to here. I'm done. I'm sick of it. I want them to pay. I'm tired of putting up with it. They're not even sorry. And I keep forgiving them. They don't deserve forgiveness. How many of us are like that? I know I've been there. I know where I look at people and I say, you don't deserve my forgiveness. You deserve to pay. Because you've talked behind my back. I've heard you. I've heard the things that you've said about me. I've seen the things you've posted. And that's little stuff. But Andy, you don't understand. Somebody hurt me a long time ago. Someone left when I was young and never came back and hasn't treated me right ever since. Somebody abused me while I was younger. And you know what? I'm just not over it enough, and I feel like they should pay. You can talk all day long. But I'm telling you right now, we cannot ask for forgiveness until we start giving it. We cannot be ready to receive forgiveness if we are not ready to give it. This doesn't mean, I was telling the youth earlier, this does not mean you have to text the person every day, have a phone conversation, invite them for dinner, move them back into your house, who it was. It does not mean your relationship is all hunky-dory, everything's back to normal. This does not mean you forget what happened. It does not mean you don't learn from your mistakes. This means you forgive them, because that's what we're called to do. I know it's tough. And man, I would love to have a conversation with somebody about your past and my past, and we can relate. Because man, I deal with it every single day about forgiving the person. Forgiving multiple people. And I know I'm stepping on a lot of toes, and I know Jesus never did that. So I'm totally being un-Christ-like right now if I'm stepping on your toes. But you may be asking yourself, Andy, you just don't get it, man. You're 24 years old. You have no idea what you're talking about. You can't tell me how to live my life. You can't ask me to forgive the person who decided they didn't want to be a parent anymore and they left. You can't ask me to forgive the person who was unfaithful to me. You can't ask me to help the person who's hurt me multiple times over and over and over again. You can't ask me, you can't ask me, you can't ask me. And I'm telling you, I am not asking you. God is telling you to forgive. I'm on the verge of tears right now because I'm talking to myself. Forgiveness is a real thing, and man, when you open yourself up to it, it changes your life. You spend nights awake wondering, oh, how am I going to deal with this? So this person needs to pay. Guess what? That's not your job. 1 Peter 5:7, one of my favorite verses of all time, cast your cares upon me because I care for you. It is not your burden to carry, it is not your load to lift. You give it to him, you forgive, and you move on. And any payment, any judgment is on God. It's between them and him. You're done. Your job is done. Your payment is paid. You're free. We cannot ask and expect forgiveness if we are not willing to give it. Monica and the worship team can come forward. We finish, and we come to one of my favorite songs of all time. By grace alone, somehow I stand. Where even angels fear to tread is one of the lyrics that we're about to listen to. Listen to that. By grace alone, somehow I stand, where even angels fear to tread. We stand? You're asking, where do we stand? What does that mean? We're grace how I stand. What does that mean? Where am I standing? You are standing in forgiveness. You are standing in love, in passion, in gifts, and somebody who loves you so much that he's willing to die for you. Jesus forgave the people who were crucifying while he was being crucified. What kind of example do you need? What kind of leader do you need to follow? Except for that. That's enough. Let's stand up, let's sing together, and let's not forget that if you want forgiveness, we have to be willing to give it. And if you need forgiveness, if you've done something wrong to your spouse, to your children, to your friends in the past, come up here. If you need forgiveness for your sins and you've never accepted Jesus before, come up here. We'll pray with you. We'll talk with you. We'll leave you alone if you want us to. We love you. God will forgive you for anything. Let's sing to him.